Chapter 49. While everyone in Leavenworth speculated about Warden Matthews' future, Steve Lacy was promoted to the rank of lieutenant and notified that he was being transferred to a medium security prison in Phoenix, Arizona. Lacy was well known because he was head of the prison shakedown crew, had worked at the prison 8 years, and was married to Sharon Lacy, another prison employee. Lacy's life centered around the hot house. The tall Texas native couldn't remember a time when he didn't want to be, as he put it, a cop. Even as a schoolboy, he had thought of himself as a policeman. You can look at some kids and say, yeah, little Johnny is going to grow up and be a thug because he acts like one. And sure enough, he ends up in a penitentiary, Lacy explained. And then there are guys who grow up and get into it with the little Johnnies of the world. They say, no, you are not going to pick on this guy and you are not going to take his lunch because I'm not going to let you do it. You just don't do those things. I was one of them. I don't like bullies, and there have been times when I've seen someone who don't stand up for himself and I have stepped in and stopped Johnny because I knew I could. Guys like me, Lacy said, grew up to be cops. On January 14th, a going away party was held for the Lacys at the Officers Training Center, a meeting hall across from the penitentiary. It was a beer and potato chips affair, and the men clustered around a silvery keg in a corner by the front door while the women sat at folding tables. Both Lacys wore blue denim jeans, cowboy boots, and western shirts. The crowd was diverse. Roy Moore, a wiry, balding, gray-bearded guard who rode a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, arrived wearing a black Harley-Davidson t-shirt and matching hat, with a knife hanging from his belt. Moore was a tough-talking, beer-guzzling, popular 39-year-old guard who had embarrassed Matthews when he first arrived and was given a tour to a regional director. At the time, Moore was assigned to the rear gate and was not supposed to allow anyone to pass unless the person showed him a bureau identification card or he recognized his face. When Matthews and Larry Du Bois appeared at the gate, Moore didn't recognize the regional director, so he asked to see his identification card. Du Bois didn't have it, but Matthews jokingly offered to vouch for his boss. Moore wasn't impressed. Sorry, bureau policy says I can't let you through. You might be holding the warden hostage. Matthews was not amused, though he persuaded Moore to open the gate. The story had endeared Moore to his fellow guards, particularly at Benny's, where he became a legend. Moore was one of 57 employees who came to the party. All were white except one older black guard who stopped by for a few minutes to congratulate Lacy but didn't stay or mingle. Warden Matthews didn't attend. Instead, he sent Connor to say a few words. No one was surprised. Lacy was one of O'Brien's old guards, and he didn't think much of Matthews' management style. As far as Lacy was concerned, the bureau was too soft, and it was managers like Matthews who were responsible. Jesus Christ, these inmates get to see first-run movies, have HBO, and Las Vegas-style entertainment. It's bullshit. If I want to go to college, I have to pay for it, but these assholes can go to college free, and my tax dollars pay for it. It's bullshit, he repeated. The Lacey's going-away party was run by Wayne Smith, who now worked in the regional office in Kansas City, but had been the captain at the hot house under O'Brien. Sharon Lacy had worked as Smith's secretary. We're here tonight to say goodbye to Pee-wee and Pumpkin, Smith began. Pumpkin was clearly Sharon, but he wasn't certain why Steve Lacy was called Pee-wee. Smith had turned the platform over to one of Lacy's friends, who recounted a raucous and fictitious story about Lacy's pre-marriage days that ended with the woman describing his potency in Pee-wee terms. That speaker was followed by other friends who roasted the couple with more stories filled with sexual innuendo. There were gag gifts and the standard employee farewell gift for every Leavenworth guard, a huge brass ball, as in, it takes brass balls to work at Leavenworth. Sharon Lacy's boss in the business office recalled how she had tricked him as part of an office prank into believing that he was being sued for sexual discrimination. In telling the story, the speaker made a racist slur, but the crowd enjoyed the tale, and when it came time for Sharon and Steve to react to the hour's worth of barbs, they gave as many one-liners as they had taken. And then Steve Lacy turned serious. I just want you all to recognize the good old days. They'll come back, he said. You can count on it. Lacy was referring to a time in the Bureau's history, he explained later, when officers had more rights than inmates, and the hot house was really a penitentiary, not a nursery school. It was a time when you didn't have inmates crawling up on daddy's knee at meals to snivel. a slap at Warden Matthews' practice of jotting down inmates' complaints during mainline. After the formal program, most of the men gathered around Ralph Seaver, the legendary lieutenant who had spent his career at Leavenworth and was revered by the guards as the best there ever was. As it so often did, the talk turned to Thomas Silverstein, and Seaver recalled the first time he had met Silverstein and how, in his view, he was not much different from other murderers. Inmates, Seaver explained, expect guards to tell them no and to punish them when they violate the rules. It's all part of the game, but you never want the relationship to get personal, he warned. Whenever an inmate believes for some reason that the natural conflict between convicts and officers is personal, his ego is at stake, and in the penitentiary, image is 1,000 times more important than reality. The fact that Seaver attended the Lacy's party was a tribute. If Seaver thought highly of Lacy, then the veteran guards in Leavenworth knew he was all right. It had been the U.S. Air Force that first sent Steve Lacy to Leavenworth. His father was a U.S. Customs agent, and Lacy was anxious to emulate him. I was taught that there is a right and there is a wrong, Lacy recalled, and there is no gray, and I believe that. And if I am fortunate enough to have children, they will be raised the same way. You learn the rules and you play by those rules, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. There is only yes sir and no sir, and that's how things should be. Lacy joined the military after high school graduation and was sent to Korea as a military policeman. He earned a reputation there for being a tough, streetwise cop and made a series of sensational drug busts, but he was always cynical about his job and his bosses, and this so irritated his commanding officer that Lacy was eventually reassigned to guard duty at the disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth. Most would have hated the job. He loved it. After he was discharged, Lacy worked for the town of Leavenworth as a police officer until there was an opening at the federal penitentiary. He reported to work in July of 1983. Just as in the military, Steve Lacy's frequently acid tongue made some supervisors cringe. I'm not prejudiced when it comes to inmates, Lacy liked to say. I hate all of them the same. Another favorite. If you don't like what I'm doing, then fuck you. And if you have any friends, then fuck them too. Lacy prided himself on telling things just like they are, not how some big shot wants them. While his personality often was annoying, none of his bosses questioned his dedication. He was the first to volunteer, the first to accept risky assignments. When he wasn't at work, he was at Benny's with other off-duty guards. My work comes first, he said. It comes before family, wife, everyone, and it has to be that way because in this business, every officer's life depends on his fellow officer being there to back him up. If the telephone rings, then I'm on my way to the penitentiary no matter what time or what I'm doing. Lacy married for the first time shortly after he went to work at the hothouse. It didn't last. My wife would want me to talk about what had happened at work when I got home. But that was the last thing I wanted to do, Lacy recalled. She really didn't understand all the shit that goes on in here, and I got tired of trying to explain it. How could Lacy explain over pork chops and green beans at dinner what it felt like to supervise a convict in his cell who was sucking his own dick? How could he tell her about an inmate who raped another inmate with a broom handle, then beat him unconscious? How could he describe how it felt to carry an inmate to the prison hospital after he'd been stabbed and had blood squirting out of his chest all over your hands and chest? Worse, how could Lacy explain to her how much he loved working in the prison and how he'd rather be there than sitting at home with her watching television at night? I stood at work one day and watched John Greshner and another inmate kill this snitch. They had waited 7 years to get him, and they were stabbing him right in front of me in the center hall, Lacy said. They had shanks so big they looked like swords. Lacy had tried to tell his wife about the stabbing. I was sitting at the dinner table when I said, I saw a man lose his life today. I watched the whole thing, but she really didn't understand. When Lacy decided to get a divorce, it was Lou, a fellow guard, who offered him a spare bedroom. When Lacy needed someone to talk to, it was his buddies at Benny's, who sat by his side, got him drunk, and took him home. And when Lacy began dating again, it was these same friends who organized the Hog Contest, a monthly competition in which each guard tried to find the ugliest woman he could ask out on a date. They would bring her to Benny's for everyone to see, and then afterward return to Benny's and vote on who was the worst looking date. The winner got to drink all night for free. Steve Lacy couldn't think of a single friend he had who didn't work at the hothouse. The reason we tend to socialize together is because no one else really understands what we do, he said. Civilians look down on us because they need someone to protect them. They come running. When I was a cop on the streets, I waited and counted once to see how long it would take someone to say thank you. It was 6 months. 6 months before someone actually thanked me for putting my butt on the line. In our world, there are only two sides, them and us, and there's a bunch more of them than us. After his divorce, Lacy secretly began dating Sharon, who was then working as Captain Smith's secretary in the lieutenant's office. She was in her early 20s and had grown up in the Leavenworth area. She was extremely popular. She was outgoing and, as a co-worker later put it, perky with long brown hair, ivory skin, and an attractive figure. She was smart too. When other employees discovered that Lacy was dating her, there were problems. Some of the lieutenants began writing negative reviews of Steve because they didn't like him crossing that staff management line. In order to avoid possible conflicts, Sharon transferred out of the lieutenant's office, management, to a job in prison industries. She had worked in industries before when she first came to work at the prison in September of 1984, but she had trouble adjusting to the work environment this time. The fact that convicts were looked upon as co-workers and called supervisors by their first names bothered her. I had read reports and these inmates' jackets. I sat through disciplinary hearings, she recalled. I was surprised some of those inmates were still alive after reading what they had done. I still thought like a cop, and the staff in industries got upset with me. They tell me, hey, you got to get along with these inmates or else they won't work. You got to treat them better. They tried to deprogram me, but I refused to go back to their level because I had seen the real side of these men, and most were monsters. Sharon Lacy told inmates not to call her by her first name, and when one did, even though she was the secretary, she saw to it that he was fired from his job. She also became the first woman in the prison's history to write a shot that resulted in an inmate being taken to the hole. She eventually became so uncomfortable working in industries that she moved to a new job in the administrative building away from the inmates. She would have a similar job when she and Steve moved to Phoenix. The fact that neither she nor Lacy had any friends other than their co-workers didn't bother them, but it did Sharon. It worries me because Steve's dad was like that. All his life, all he did was work, work, work. He gave his life to the customs service, and suddenly it was over and he was retired and out of it. I asked Steve, what happens when we retire? What happens when we are not part of the Bureau family anymore? But so far, he doesn't want anything else. She thought a lot about the Bureau family. People don't understand Bureau people, not at all. You can absolutely hate someone in the Bureau, but if you go to Benny's and there's a fight, everyone in the Bureau will stand behind that person, even if they hate his guts. It doesn't matter because he's one of them and everyone else is an outsider. And you should hear these guys talk. These guys thrive on violence. You should hear them talk about killing and how the prison needs a good inmate stabbing. They are all like that. It's addicting to them. Benny's had a disc jockey playing records when the Lacys and a dozen of their friends arrived from the training center to continue the farewell celebration. The disc jockey had streaked blonde hair and wore a gold earring. Some guards joked about getting the earring from Steve Lacy to wear. One of the Lacy's pals told the DJ about the Lacy's promotion and asked him to play a song just for Steve and Sharon to dance to. Don't make it any of that ninja music, he warned, referring to rap songs. The DJ, somewhat intimidated, asked for a suggestion. Minutes later, the couple took to the floor to the country western sounds of "The South is Going to Rise Again." One of the Lacy's best friends had driven up from Texas to attend the party. He had been a guard at the hot house, but had been promoted to a lieutenant and transferred to a medium security prison. Over a beer, he explained that going from a penitentiary to a kiddie joint hadn't been easy. "I hope Steve does better than me," he said. He had been accused of brutality 5 times. The last charge was filed after he ripped off an inmate's shirt because the inmate had refused to strip for a search as ordered. "In Leavenworth, inmates are thankful to get steak," he complained. "Where I'm working now, they take it back to the cook and tell him they want it medium rare." A few months later, the lieutenant was demoted and returned to Leavenworth as a guard. Lacy knew the transition was going to be difficult, especially since he felt that Leavenworth was too easy on inmates. He was also aware of Sharon's concerns about their lack of friends outside prison, but tonight was no time to dwell on problems. They plan to dance all night and then have breakfast at a local diner. Not everyone is meant to do prison work, Lacy said, and then putting his arm around Lou, the guard who had taken him in when he first got his divorce, and the pal who had driven from Texas to be with him. He added, "But if you stick around, you get addicted. You can't stop, and it takes you over your whole life. And I can tell you right now, if I were asked, I'd follow these two guys into a group of inmates anytime, any place, and I'd never have to worry about my back as long as they were with me. And they would do the same for me." "Damn right," one said. The other nodded. "I'd give my life for these guys," he concluded, "and they would give up theirs for me." And that isn't something that many people can say.